It was a trap.
The trap? We gotta go now!
The desert remembers everything. Every drop of blood, every broken promise, every man who rode out into the sun and never came back.
I don't know what you're talking
Eleanor
about.
Thorngate sat on her porch in the dying light of a Montana evening, and she listened to the desert remember. 74 years old, blind for 18 of them. But her ears could hear things most people missed. The whisper of a rattlesnake at 50 yards. The difference between a Ford engine and a Chevy at 2 miles out. The subtle shift in a man's voice when he was lying. And tonight she heard death coming. 7 motorcycles, Harley Davidsons, everyone. Big twins probably, shovelheads and panheads from the sound of them. Old iron, the kind of bikes men kept running out of stubbornness and love, not convenience. They were still 3 miles out, maybe more. But sound carried in the high desert, especially at dusk, when the wind died and the world held its breath between day and night. Eleanor's weathered hands found the CB radio on the table beside her. Her husband Sterling had mounted it there 30 years ago, back when he still rode. Back when the Hells Angels Montana charter met in the barn behind this very house, and the thunder of 50 motorcycles would shake the windows until dawn. Sterling had been gone 12 years now, but his radio still worked. Eleanor's fingers traced the familiar controls. Channel 19, the trucker's channel, the channel anyone might be listening to if they were smart enough to pay attention. She pressed the transmit button. Her voice when it came was steady, calm, the voice of a woman who had lived through worse than this and survived. To any riders on Route 89 approaching mile marker 34, this is Eleanor Thorngate. If you can hear me, it's a trap. They're waiting for you. Don't stop. Don't stop for the old blind woman on the porch. I'm the bait. Save yourselves. She released the button. Silence. The 7 engines growled closer in the gathering dark. Eleanor Thorngate settled back in her chair and waited to see if the men on those motorcycles were smart enough to listen, or foolish enough to try to save her anyway. Either way, blood was coming to her land tonight. The desert always remembered, and it always collected its debts. 1,700 miles southeast 3 days earlier, Clayton Maddox stood in his workshop staring at a motorcycle he hadn't touched in 8 years. The bike was a 1976 Harley Davidson shovelhead. Midnight blue hand-painted flames licking back from the tank in golden orange. Custom pipes that used to sound like rolling thunder. A machine built for one purpose, to eat highway and spit out miles. Now it was just metal and dust. Clayton was 69 years old. His hands were scarred from 1,000 roadside repairs, a dozen bar fights, and 1 tour in the Gulf War, back when he was young enough to think he was invincible. His face was leather, lines the kind of face that made people cross the street or buy him a drink, depending on their nature. He'd been president of the Hells Angels Oakland chapter from 1970 to 2008, 38 years wearing the patch, 3 decades of brotherhood, blood, and belonging. Then he'd walked away, not retired, not honorably discharged into the elder statesman role most presidents took when age caught up with their reflexes. He'd walked away angry in the middle of a fight with his vice president that split the chapter down the middle and left wounds that never quite healed. That VP's name was Boone, Blackjack Boone. And 3 days ago, Dalton Briggs had called to tell Clayton that Blackjack was dead. Heart attack. Dropped in his driveway at 67, motorcycle still running, never made it to the hospital. Clayton should have felt something. Relief maybe, vindication, the petty satisfaction of outliving your enemy. Instead, he felt nothing but the weight of wasted years. The phone rang again. Clayton let it ring 4 times before he picked up. Maddox. Ironhide. The voice on the other end was Dalton Hammer Briggs, current president of the Oakland chapter. A man Clayton had known for 40 years. You get my message. I got it. You coming? Clayton looked at the dusty shovelhead. Why would I? Because Blackjack's last words were about you. Silence stretched between them like the miles. What did he say? Clayton finally asked. He said, tell Ironhide the ride ain't over till we both cross the finish line. Then he was gone. Clayton closed his eyes, felt something crack in the armor he'd built around himself these last 15 years. Where's the Memorial, Montana? His birthplace. Little town called Gardner, up near Yellowstone. We're riding out day after tomorrow, 7 of us. Would have been 8, but Bull's got pneumonia. Doctor won't clear him to ride. 7, not 8. Numbers mattered in the MC world. Everything meant something. You need a road captain, Clayton said quietly. We need you, Hammer replied. I know you and Blackjack had your war. I know you left because of it. But whatever that fight was about, it died with him, brother. Come help us put him in the ground right. Then we can all move forward. Clayton looked around his workshop. Custom bike builds in various stages of completion. A business he'd built from nothing. A quiet life in the New Mexico desert where nobody asked questions and the past stayed buried. A life so quiet he could barely remember why he was still breathing. "When do you leave?" he asked. 48 hours. Oakland Clubhouse, 6 a.m. "I'll be there." He hung up before Hammer could say anything else. Clayton stood alone in his workshop for a long time, staring at the shovelhead. Then he found a rag and started wiping away 8 years of dust. "Some debts you paid, even when it cost you everything." 2,000 miles north that same night. Eleanor Thorngate moved through her house with the confidence of someone who could see perfectly in the dark. Because for her, there was no difference between dark and light. There hadn't been for 18 years. Glaucoma had taken her sight slowly, then all at once. One day she could still make out shapes and shadows. The next, the world went black and never came back. But Eleanor had learned long ago that darkness was only an enemy if you let it be. She knew every inch of this house, every creaking floorboard, every door that stuck in its frame, every window that rattled when the wind picked up. She'd lived here for 52 years, raised a son here, buried a husband from here. The house was in her bones, and tonight something was wrong with it. She'd heard them 3 hours ago, 4 vehicles moving slowly up the access road that led to her ranch. They'd stopped at this cattle gate, idled there for 5 minutes, while someone got out to open it. That was the first wrong thing. Nobody opened that gate except Eleanor, her son Warren, when he visited twice a year, and the few old-timers from Sterling's MC days who still came around to check on her. The vehicles had driven closer, parked in a semicircle around her barn engines, running for another 10 minutes before shutting off. Men's voices, 6 of them, maybe 7, low and careful. Then footsteps approaching the house. Eleanor had positioned herself in her kitchen, out of sight from the windows, but close enough to hear. The knock, when it came, was polite, almost respectful. She waited. Another knock. Eleanor walked to the door but didn't open it. "Can I help you?" "Ma'am, we're with Mountain West Pipeline. We're doing surveys in the area for a new gas line. Your property is on the road. We need to do some preliminary measurements. Won't take but an hour." The voice was smooth, professional, wrong. Eleanor had lived in Montana long enough to know what pipeline surveyors sounded like. They came in trucks with company logos, wore hard hats and reflective vests, carried clipboards, and talked about easements and compensation. These men sounded like they were reading from a script. "Do you have identification?" she asked. A pause. "Of course, ma'am. I can slide it under the door if you'd like." "That won't be necessary. Give me your company name and permit number. I'll call the county to verify." Another pause. Longer this time. "Ma'am, we're on a tight schedule. If we could just—" "The county office is closed," Eleanor said calmly. "Come back Monday morning with proper documentation. I'll be happy to discuss it then." Silence on the other side of the door, then footsteps retreating. Eleanor didn't move. She stood perfectly still, listening. The men didn't get back in their vehicles. She heard them walking around the property, checking sight lines, testing the ground. One of them walked the perimeter of the house twice. They were casing her home, and Eleanor Thorngate, blind and 74 years old and alone on 200 acres of Montana ranch land, knew exactly what that meant. She waited until their engines faded into the distance. Then she waited another hour to be sure. Finally, she made her way to the barn. The structure was old, built by Sterling's father in 1957. It smelled like hay and motor oil and memories. Eleanor navigated it perfectly, her cane tapping a rhythm on the concrete floor, until she reached the workbench in the back corner. Sterling's workbench. She'd kept it exactly as he'd left it. Her hands found the CB radio, the old Cobra 29 chrome and solid, still plugged into the cigarette lighter adapter Sterling had rigged to run off a marine battery. He'd kept it out here because the barn's tin roof somehow gave better range than the house. Eleanor turned it on. The squelch hissed. She adjusted it by feel muscle memory from the hundreds of times she'd watched Sterling do the same thing before her eyes failed. She sat down on Sterling's old stool and began to listen. Channel 19 was quiet. A trucker called out a smoky report near Billings. Someone else asked about road conditions on I-90. Eleanor switched to Channel 6, the bikers' channel, or it used to be back in Sterling's day. More silence. She methodically worked her way through the channels, listening, learning, trying to understand what those men had really been doing on her property. It was on Channel 22 that she heard it. 2 male voices, clear as day, close enough that they must have been transmitting from somewhere within a few miles. "Confirm the route. They'll come right past here. Route 89 northbound, probably hit mile marker 34 around dusk, day after tomorrow. And the old woman? Perfect setup. Viper wants it clean. Make it look like they stopped to help got ambushed. Tragic. But that's what happens when you ride into the wrong territory. 7 of them, you said. 7, but they're old. Late 60s, most of them. Won't be much of a fight. A third voice cut in. Younger. Harder. Don't underestimate them. These aren't weekend warriors. These are Hell's Angels. Oakland Charter. If even half the stories are true, these men have forgotten more about violence than we've ever learned. We do this smart. We do this from distance. And we do not give them a chance to get close. The first voice again. What about the woman? Collateral damage. Wrong place, wrong time. We burn the house after. Make it look like the bikers did it. Scorpion's MC takes the territory and Ironhide's legacy dies with him on some blind woman's property in the middle of nowhere. Poetic, really. The radio went silent. Eleanor's hands were shaking. Ironhide. She knew that name. Knew it like she knew Sterling's voice, even though she hadn't heard it in 15 years. Clayton Maddox, Ironhide. Sterling's brother in every way that mattered except blood. And 7 Hells Angels were riding into an ambush meant to kill them all. On her land, using her as bait. Eleanor stood up slowly. Her mind was racing, but her hands were steady now. She had 48 hours, maybe less. She was an old woman. Blind. Alone. But she was also the widow of Sterling Ironclad Thorngate, founding member of the Hells Angels Montana Charter. A man who'd taught her more about strategy, tactics, and surviving impossible odds than most soldiers learned in a lifetime. Sterling used to say, the best defense is making sure the enemy never realizes they're the ones in the trap. Eleanor Thorngate had 2 days to turn predators into prey. She got to work. 1,800 miles of highway, 43 hours of riding. Clayton Maddox hadn't sat on a motorcycle in 8 years. The first 100 miles damn near killed him. His back screamed. His knees felt like broken glass. His hands cramped around the grips until his fingers went numb. But somewhere around Flagstaff, muscle memory took over. The highway rhythm seeped back into his bones. The shovelhead's engine rumbled beneath him like a living thing, and Clayton remembered why he'd spent most of his life on 2 wheels instead of 4. Freedom wasn't a destination. It was the space between where you'd been and where you were going. It was the moment when the past fell away behind you and the future hadn't caught up yet. It was the wind and the road and the machine, and nothing else mattered. He met the other 6 at a truck stop outside of Reno. They were waiting in a neat row, bikes lined up like soldiers at attention. 6 Harleys, each one as individual as the man who rode it. Hammer's immaculate road king, Preacher's ancient panhead that somehow still ran. Ghost's murdered out Softail, Wrench's custom FXR with the Norwegian flag painted on the tank. Lucky's Dyna with more chrome than paint. Bull's? No, Bull wasn't here. Bull was home in Oakland, lungs full of pneumonia doctor's orders. So 6 bikes, 6 brothers, and now Clayton made 7. Hammer was first to approach. 64 years old, built like a fire hydrant, bald head gleaming in the fluorescent lights. He'd been a prospect when Clayton was president, worked his way up through every position in the chapter, earned every patch through blood and loyalty. They stood facing each other for a long moment. Then Hammer stuck out his hand. Ironhide. Clayton took it. Hammer. The handshake lasted 3 seconds. Long enough to communicate everything that words couldn't. The others approached one by one. Preacher. Vernon Kane, 68, the oldest man still riding with the chapter. White beard down to his chest, eyes that had seen everything and judged nothing. He'd been there the night Clayton patched in back in 1970. He'd been there the night Clayton walked out in 2008. He embraced Clayton without a word. Ghost. Tyrell Washington, 62, built like a blade and just as sharp. Former Army Ranger, 2 tours in the first Gulf War, same as Clayton. Road captain now. The man who planned the routes and kept everyone alive on the highway. Good to see you, brother. Good to be seen. Wrench, Magnus Eriksson, 63, the club's master mechanic. Immigrated from Norway in the 70s, found his family in the MC. Fewer words than anyone Clayton had ever met, but the man could make a dead engine sing. A nod, a firm grip. That was Wrench. Lucky. Dexter Cross, 60, the youngest of them, and the only one still smiling, like life was one long party. He'd earned his road name by walking away from 3 crashes that should have killed him. Ironhide, you magnificent bastard, thought we'd lost you to the straight world. Still time for that, Clayton replied. Colton Mercer, Bull. Except Bull wasn't there. Clayton felt his absence like a missing tooth. How is he? Clayton asked. Hammer shook his head. Not good. Doctors say it's touch and go. He wanted to ride. We had to hide his keys. Silence settled over them. 7 riders minus 1. Let's ride for him too, Preacher said quietly, for all the brothers who can't ride anymore. They mounted up, 7 motorcycles, 7 men whose combined age added up to nearly 4.5 centuries, men who'd survived wars, bar fights, crashes, divorces, cancer, and every other disaster life could throw at them. Men who'd spent most of their lives being told they were outlaws, criminals, degenerates. Men who knew the truth, they were brothers. And brotherhood was the only religion that mattered. The engines started in sequence. A symphony of controlled explosions, each engine with its own voice, its own personality. Hammer raised his fist. The signal. They rode north into the gathering dark. Behind them, the city lights faded. Ahead, the highway stretched endless and black. And somewhere in Montana, an old blind woman was preparing for war. Day 2, Wyoming. They stopped for the night at a roadside motel that had seen better days sometime around 1987. The kind of place that took cash and didn't ask questions. 7 motorcycles in the parking lot drew stares. 7 men in leather vests with Hell's Angels patches drew more. But nobody said anything. People out here knew better. They claimed 4 rooms doubled up. Clayton found himself with Preacher. The old man moved slowly, arthritis in his knees, making every step deliberate. But when he finally settled into the chair by the window, his eyes were sharp. You ready to talk about it? Preacher asked. Clayton was stretched out on one of the bed's boots, still on, staring at the water-stained ceiling. About what? About why you walked away 15 years ago? About why you and Blackjack damn near destroyed the chapter over whatever the hell you two were fighting about? About why you're really here? Hammer asked me to come. Hammer asked, but you could have said no. You've been saying no for 15 years, so why say yes now? Clayton was quiet for a long time. Blackjack and I had different ideas about what the club should be, he finally said. I wanted to keep it pure, original, old school values, old school ways. He wanted to adapt, evolve, bring in new blood with new ideas. Sounds reasonable on both sides. It was, until it wasn't, until every decision became a fight, until the chapters started splitting into camps, his guys, my guys, until brotherhood became politics. Preacher nodded slowly. And you walked rather than watch it tear apart. I walked because I was part of the problem. As long as I was there, as long as I was president, Blackjack would keep fighting me. He'd never back down. Neither would I. So I removed myself from the equation. That took balls. That was cowardice. Clayton's voice was flat. I told myself I was saving the club. Truth was, I couldn't handle being challenged. Couldn't handle the idea that maybe I was wrong. So I ran. And now Blackjack's dead, and you've got to live with never making it right. Yeah. Preacher was quiet for a moment. Then you know what Blackjack did after you left? Clayton shook his head. He cried, sat in the clubhouse alone middle of the night and cried like a baby. Ghost found him. Blackjack made him swear never to tell anyone. But Ghost told me anyway because he knew I'd keep it sacred. Clayton felt something twist in his chest. Blackjack didn't want you gone, Preacher continued. He wanted you to stay and fight it out. Work it through, find the middle ground. When you left, it broke something in him. He became harder, more rigid, like he was trying to prove something. Prove what? That he could lead without you. That he didn't need his best friend to make the chapter work. He succeeded technically. The chapter survived, grew even. But he never forgave himself for losing you. And he never forgave you for giving up on him. The words hung in the air like smoke. His last words, Clayton said quietly, about the finish line. He was saying he forgives you, and that wherever the road goes next, you're riding it together, even if one of you is already on the other side. Clayton closed his eyes, felt tears threatening for the first time in years. I don't deserve that, he whispered. None of us deserve brotherhood, Preacher replied. That's what makes it sacred. We choose each other anyway. Fuck-ups, failures and all. He stood up, joints popping, and moved toward the bathroom. At the door, he paused. Get some sleep, Ironhide. We've got a long ride tomorrow, and I've got a feeling Montana's going to ask more of us than just showing up. He closed the door. Clayton lay in the dark and let the tears come. Outside, 6 motorcycles sat silent in the parking lot, chrome reflecting the cold stars. Tomorrow they would ride again. Tomorrow they would carry their dead brother home. And somewhere ahead, something was waiting for them in the Montana dark. Day 3. Route 89, Montana. The landscape changed as they crossed into Montana. The world opened up into something bigger, older, harder. Mountains rose in the distance like the bones of the earth breaking through skin. The sky stretched so wide it made you feel small and infinite at the same time. They'd been riding for 6 hours straight. No stops except for gait. The formation was tight professional. Ghost in the lead as road captain reading the road and the traffic. Hammer beside him, then Preacher and Wrench. Lucky and Clayton bringing up the rear. 7 riders in 2 columns, a Brotherhood on wheels. The CB radio crackled to life on Channel 6. Ghost's voice. Mile marker 30 coming's up. Another hour to Gardner. How's everyone holding up? A chorus of clicks. The nonverbal acknowledgement. Everyone was good. Clayton rode and let the highway meditation take him. This was what Sterling used to call the long think. The place where the miles blurred together and your mind went somewhere deeper than conscious thought. He was thinking about Catherine, his wife dead 14 years now. Cancer took her, slowly gave them time to say goodbye. He'd been there at the end, holding her hand while she slipped away. She'd forgiven him for the life he'd led, the nights away at club runs, the danger that came with the patch, the fact that she'd always have to share him with the Brotherhood. I knew who you were when I married you, she'd whispered near the end. I just wish you'd known it too. He'd never understood what she meant. Not until now. The CB crackled again, but this time it wasn't Ghost. It was a woman's voice, older, steady, clear. And to any riders on Route 89 approaching mile marker 34, this is Eleanor Thorngate. If you can hear me, it's a trap. They're waiting for you. Don't stop. Don't stop for the old blind woman on the porch. I'm the bait. Save yourselves. 7 motorcycles slowed in unison. Ghost's voice came back on the CB. Did everyone copy that? 6 clicks. Then Clayton's voice, pull over, now. They coasted to the shoulder. Engines idled, rumbling like distant thunder. Clayton dismounted, pulled off his helmet. The others followed suit. Play it again, Hammer said. Ghost had a recorder on his radio, old school tech from the trucking days. He rewound and hit play. Eleanor's voice filled the air again, calm, deliberate, warning them away. Eleanor Thorngate, Clayton said quietly. Jesus Christ. The others looked at him. You know her, Ghost asked. She's Sterling's widow, Sterling Ironclad, Montana Charter founding member. He and I rode together for 30 years. Oh, Preacher's eyes widened. Sterling died, 12 years back? Motorcycle accident. Or that's what I was told. I didn't. Clayton's voice went rough. I didn't come to the funeral. We'd stopped talking by then. Another bridge I burned. And now his widow is broadcasting a warning that someone's using her as bait to kill us. Wrench's accent made the words sound even more ominous. Lucky looked north up the highway. Mile marker 34. That's 4 miles from here. About that, Ghost confirmed. Hammer turned to Clayton. What do you want to do? Clayton stared up the empty highway. Heat shimmers rose from the asphalt. The mountains watched impassive. She said, don't stop. Save ourselves. That's what she said. Sterling used to tell me, when someone gives you tactical advice in a hot situation, you've got 2 choices, trust it or question it, but you don't ignore it. So we turned back, Lucky asked. No. Clayton's voice was flat, hard. We go forward, but we go smart. Ghost was already pulling out his phone, calling up satellite maps. If someone's setting an ambush, they'll have the high ground. This area, he zoomed in. Route 89 runs through a valley here. Hills on both sides. Perfect kill zone if you're thinking like a military planner. How many are we talking about? Wrench asked. Unknown, but they're confident enough to bait a trap for 7 Hell's Angels. That means either they've got superior numbers, superior weapons, or they're dumb as hell. Or all 3, Preacher murmured. Clayton looked at each of them in turn. These men, his brothers, men who'd followed him into uncertainty without hesitation. This isn't your fight, he said. Eleanor's warning was for me. Someone wants Ironhide. The rest of you can ride around, take the back roads to Gardner. No shame in it. Hammer's response was immediate. Fuck that. Seconded, said Ghost. Motion carried, Preacher added. Lucky grinned. Besides, when's the last time we got to do anything interesting? Only Wrench was quiet. He was studying the maps on Ghost's phone with the intensity of a man solving a complex equation. What are you thinking, Wrench? Clayton asked. I'm thinking. The big Norwegian looked up. I'm thinking someone very stupid has threatened a brother's widow. and I'm thinking we should teach them the error of their ways." "With extreme prejudice," Ghost said quietly. Hammer turned to Clayton. "You know this woman. You trust her judgment." "Sterling trusted her with his life. That's good enough for me." "Then we ride in, but we ride tactical. Ghost, your point. I want a mile between you and the rest of us. You spot anything wrong, anything at all, you call it, and get clear. The rest of us," he looked at the terrain again, "will approach from the high ground. Leave the bikes going on foot." "We're not as young as we used to be," Lucky pointed out. "Which is why we're smarter than we used to be." Hammer's voice was iron. "We do this right, and nobody dies today except the people who need killing." They remounted. Ghost took point, his black soft-tail accelerating up the highway until he was a dot in the distance. The other six waited, counting time, watching the road. Finally, Ghost's voice crackled over the CB. "I've got eyes on a small ranch house. Mile marker 34, just like she said. One woman on the porch, no visible hostiles, but..." "But what?" Hammer pressed. "But the birds aren't flying, no insects. And I can see 3 vehicles parked behind a tree line about 200 yards west of the house. Trucks, blacked out windows." "Fall back," Hammer ordered. "Slow and easy, don't spook them." "Copy." Clayton felt his pulse steady. Combat calm. The thing that happened when the talking stopped and the doing started. He'd felt it in Kuwait, felt it in 100 bar fights and territorial disputes. Your body knew what to do. You just had to let it work. "How do you want to play this?" Preacher asked Hammer. But Hammer was looking at Clayton. "This is your call, Ironhide. She warned you. This is your fight." Clayton thought about Sterling, about Brotherhood, about an old blind woman brave enough to broadcast a warning even though it meant signing her own death warrant, about Eleanor Thorngate waiting on that porch while armed men hid in the trees around her home. "We don't leave her," Clayton said. "Whatever they're planning, we stop it. Sterling would have ridden into hell for any of us. We do no less for his widow." 6 nods, no hesitation. "Then let's go save a lady," Lucky said. They turned off the highway onto a dirt access road that Ghost had spotted on the maps. The road wound up into the hills out of sight from the main route. 7 motorcycles climbed into the Montana high country as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Below them, Eleanor Thorngate sat on her porch and waited. She'd done everything she could, set every trap, prepared every contingency. Now it was up to the men on the motorcycles. The men Sterling had loved like brothers. The men she'd just lured into the same trap that was meant to kill them. Eleanor's hands were steady on the CB radio, but inside her heart was screaming. Because there was one thing she hadn't told them. One detail she'd kept back. The men waiting in the trees weren't just after Hell's Angels. They were after Clayton, specifically. Ironhide, the man who'd destroyed their club 15 years ago and scattered them like dust. This wasn't about territory or money or power. This was about revenge. And revenge didn't care who died in the crossfire. Eleanor keyed the radio one more time. "Channel 6, the biker's frequency." "Clayton Maddox," she said quietly. "If you can hear me, I'm sorry. Sterling made me promise to protect you if I ever could. I'm trying, but I'm afraid I've made it worse. They know you're coming. And they're ready." She released the button. Somewhere in the hills above, 7 engines cut out. 7 men prepared for war. And the Montana sun dropped another degree toward the waiting dark. The sun hung low over the Montana hills, painting everything in shades of copper and blood. 7 motorcycles sat silent on a ridge overlooking Route 89. The engines were cold. The men stood in a rough circle studying the terrain below, like generals planning a campaign. Because that's exactly what they were doing. Clayton Maddox had his binoculars trained on the small ranch house at mile marker 34. From this elevation, maybe 300 feet above the valley floor, he could see everything. The house itself. White clapboard tin roof wraparound porch. Modest, well-maintained. The kind of home that had sheltered generations. The woman on the porch. Even from this distance, even through the gathering dusk, he could make out her silhouette, sitting perfectly still in a wooden rocking chair, hands folded in her lap, facing the road like she was waiting for someone. Eleanor Thorngate, Sterling's widow, a woman Clayton hadn't seen in 15 years and had thought about every single day since Sterling died, and the men who wanted to kill her. Ghost had been right. 3 trucks blacked out parked in a stand of ponderosa pines about 200 yards west of the house. From the road, you'd never spot them. From this angle, they were obvious. But it was what Clayton saw through the thermal scope that made his blood run cold. 8 heat signatures, spread out in a loose perimeter around the house. 2 in the trees to the north, 3 near the barn on the east side, two more positioned in a gully that ran parallel to the road, and one inside the house itself, professional positioning, overlapping fields of fire, multiple fallback positions. Whoever planned this knew what they were doing. Talk to me, Ironhide. Hammer's voice was low calm. The voice of a man who'd been in bad situations before and survived by staying cool. 8 hostiles, military spacing, good sight lines. They're not amateurs. Clayton lowered the binoculars. And there's someone inside the house with Eleanor. Ghost swore softly. She's not alone. Doesn't look like it. Wrench was studying the approaches. The road is a kill zone. Anyone riding in gets shredded before they can react. That's the whole point of the trap. But they don't know we know, Lucky pointed out. We've got surprise. Maybe. Preacher's eyes were distant, calculating. Or maybe they heard Eleanor's second transmission, the one where she warned Clayton specifically. They might be expecting us to come in smart. Clayton played back Eleanor's last message in his mind. Her voice had been different, strained, like she was speaking under duress or with someone listening. They've got her, he said quietly. Someone's in that house with her right now. That last transmission, that was them using her to bait us in. So it's a trap inside a trap, Ghost said. Beautiful, efficient, and absolutely fucked. What's the play? Hammer asked Clayton directly. Every eye turned to him. Clayton Maddox, who'd walked away from leadership 15 years ago because he couldn't handle the weight of it anymore. Who'd spent 8 years hiding in the New Mexico desert building motorcycles and pretending the past didn't exist. Now 6 men were looking at him to lead them into a situation where one wrong decision would get them all killed. He could feel Sterling's ghost standing beside him, feel the weight of brotherhood, of promises made decades ago, of debts that death didn't cancel. We don't have the numbers or the firepower for a frontal assault, Clayton said slowly, thinking it through out loud. But we've got mobility, we've got terrain advantage from up here, and we've got something they don't. What's that? Lucky asked. We've got an old blind woman who's smarter than all of us combined. The others looked at him. Eleanor broadcast that warning knowing exactly what would happen, Clayton continued. She knew we'd come anyway. She's Sterling's widow. She knows how Brotherhood works, so why warn us at all? Preacher's eyes lit up. Because she's not helpless. She's giving us information. Exactly. She told us it's a trap. She told us where. She told us she's the bait. Everything we need to know she laid out for anyone smart enough to listen. But what's her play? Ghost pressed. Clayton smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. I don't know yet, but I know Eleanor Thorngate. Sterling used to say she was tougher than half the brothers in the club. Said she could read people like books and outsmart damn near anyone. If she's in that house with a gun to her head, she's not just sitting there praying, she's planning. So we trust she's got a plan and we don't know what it is. Wrench's skepticism was obvious. No, we go in, we extract her, and we trust that when the moment comes, she'll know what to do with the opening we give her. Hammer nodded slowly. Okay, how do we create that opening? Clayton pointed to the thermal scope. 8 hostiles, professional spacing, but look at the pattern. They're set up to ambush someone coming from the south on Route 89. All their attention is focused on the road approach, which means their backs are exposed to the north, Ghost said. Exactly. We flank them. We do more than that. Clayton's mind was working now, the old tactical training from his army days kicking in. We split up. Ghost, you're the fastest on foot. You and Lucky circle wide to the east, come in behind the barn. When I give the signal, you create a distraction. Make noise. Make them think we're hitting from that direction. What kind of distraction? Lucky asked. Doesn't matter. Rev a motorcycle engine, set off a truck alarm, throw rocks at the barn, just make them turn their attention east. Ghost nodded. Then what? Then Hammer, Preacher, and Wrench come in from the north, hard and fast. Take out the 2 men in the trees before they know what hit them. And you? Hammer asked. I go through the front door. Silence. That's suicide, Wrench said flatly. That's a distraction, Clayton corrected. While they're trying to figure out what's happening east and north, I walk right up the front steps like I own the place. By the time they realize I'm there, you'll already be on them. And the guy inside the house with Eleanor, Preacher asked. That's why I'm going in the front. He's expecting bikers to storm the place. He's not expecting one old man to knock on the door and ask for directions. This is insane, Ghost muttered. It's also our best shot. Clayton looked at each of them. Anyone got a better idea? No one spoke. Then that's the play. We move in 15 minutes. Gives Ghost and Lucky time to get in position. Questions, Yeah, Lucky said. If this goes sideways and we all die, I just want to say it's been an honor riding with you bastards. Preacher laughed. Sentiment noted. Try not to die. No promises. They synchronized watches, checked weapons. None of them carried guns, too many legal complications for men with their history. But they had blades, tire irons, chains. Tools of the trade that could be explained away as motorcycle maintenance equipment. Tools that could also crack skulls if necessary. Ghost and Lucky moved out first, disappearing into the scrub brush like ghosts themselves. Combat training never left you no matter how many decades passed. Hammer, Preacher, and Wrench would wait 10 minutes, then approach from the North Ridge. Clayton would wait 15, then walk right up to Eleanor's front door. The sun dropped another degree. Shadows lengthened across the valley. Clayton checked his phone. No signal out here. They were truly alone. He thought about Catherine, about the daughter he barely knew anymore, about all the bridges he'd burned and the roads he'd never taken. Then he pushed it all aside. Right now, in this moment, there was only the mission. Get to Eleanor. Extract her. Survive. Everything else could wait. His watch beeped softly. Time. Clayton Maddox started walking down the hill toward the house where an old blind woman sat waiting and armed men hid in the shadows. Behind him, the last light caught the chrome on 7 motorcycles lined up on the ridge. 7 brothers, 7 machines, 7 lives about to converge on mile marker 34. The desert remembered everything. And tonight it would remember this. Eleanor Thorngate sat very still in her rocking chair and counted heartbeats. She could hear the man behind her inside the house breathing. Shallow breaths. Nervous. He was young, maybe 30s, scared but trying not to show it. He'd been the one to force his way in 3 hours ago. Polite at first, still maintaining the pipeline surveyor fiction. Then the politeness had dropped away and the gun had come out. You're going to sit on that porch, he'd told her. You're going to look like a helpless old woman. And when those bikers stop to check on you, we're going to kill every last one of them. Eleanor had nodded, compliant, afraid. All of it performance. Because she'd been preparing for this moment for 3 days. The man didn't know that Eleanor had grown up on this ranch, that she'd learned to shoot before she learned to read, that she'd been married to a Hell's Angel for 43 years and had absorbed more tactical knowledge than most police officers would ever know. He didn't know that she'd spent 18 years navigating a world of darkness, developing senses that made her more aware of her surroundings than most sighted people. He didn't know that the floorboard behind his left foot was loose, that it creaked when weight shifted, that Eleanor could track his exact position just by listening. Most importantly, he didn't know that Eleanor had spent the last 72 hours setting traps of her own. The horses in the north pasture, she'd left the gate open. One loud noise and they'd stampede. The propane tank by the barn, she'd loosened the valve. Not enough to leak dangerously, but enough that it would hiss and smell if someone bumped it. The old cowbell Sterling had mounted on the barn door. She'd rigged it with fishing line running to 3 different locations. Trip any of them and the bell would ring. And the basement. Sterling's workshop in the basement, where he'd kept everything a man needed to defend his home, including the things that weren't strictly legal anymore. Eleanor had made 7 trips down those stairs over the past 2 days. Navigating by memory and touch, moving things, positioning them, creating options, because Sterling had taught her one fundamental truth. You might not be able to control the situation, but you can always control your preparation. Now she sat in her rocking chair, blind eyes facing the road, and waited for the moment to use everything she'd prepared. The man behind her shifted position. The floorboard creaked. How much longer? He asked into a radio. A voice crackled back. Patience, they'll come. Ironhide won't leave you hanging, old woman. He's stupid that way. Eleanor almost smiled. Stupid wasn't the word she'd use for Clayton Maddox. Stubborn, loyal, haunted by ghosts he couldn't outrun. But not stupid. Sterling used to say Clayton was the smartest tactician he'd ever met, could read a situation like a chess master reading a board. The problem was Clayton didn't trust his own judgment anymore. 15 years of exile had made him doubt himself, but Eleanor had heard something in that last radio transmission. When Clayton's voice had come over the CB, steady and sure, asking Ghost to pull over, she'd heard the old Clayton, the president, the leader, the man Sterling had believed in. Maybe Eleanor thought maybe Clayton just needed a reason to remember who he was. Maybe that's why Sterling had made her promise all those years ago when the cancer was eating him alive and he knew he didn't have much time left. If Clayton ever needs you, Ellie, you help him. You hear me? That man saved my life more times than I can count. He's lost right now, but someday he'll find his way back. And when he does, you make sure he knows he's got family waiting. Eleanor had promised, and Eleanor Thorngate kept her promises. A sound reached her ears, faint, distant, but unmistakable. Motorcycles. 7 of them, if her count was right. They'd cut their engines. They were coasting, or they had already stopped and were approaching on foot. Smart. The man behind her tensed. She heard him key his radio. Heads up. I think I heard something. Negative, road's empty. You're jumping at shadows. But Eleanor knew better. Her ears didn't lie. Clayton was coming. The question was, would he be smart enough to survive what came next? Clayton approached the house from the southwest using a dry creek bed for cover. The sun was almost gone now, maybe 10 minutes of usable light left. After that, darkness would belong to whoever knew the terrain better. Eleanor had the advantage there. He moved slowly, combat crouched knees protesting every step. His back screamed, his hands were stiff from the long ride. But his mind was clear, sharp, focused. He could see the porch now, maybe 50 yards away. Eleanor was exactly where she'd been rocking slowly back and forth, like she had all the time in the world. Clayton keyed his radio. 1 click. The signal. 10 seconds later, Lucky's voice came over the radio in a harsh whisper. In position behind the barn, 3 hostiles. Repeat, 3 hostiles. They're focused on the road approach. Ghost's voice followed. 2 more in the gully, 50 yards south of the house, both carrying rifles, or our platform looks like. That was 5, plus the 2 in the trees that Hammer's team would handle, and 1 inside with Eleanor. 8 total, just like the thermal had shown. Clayton clicked twice. Acknowledged. He waited. The world was so quiet he could hear his own heartbeat. Then sharp and sudden in the dusk, a sound split the air. A motorcycle engine, revving hard. Unmistakable Harley thunder. Lucky's distraction. The effect was immediate. Clayton watched through his binoculars as the 3 men near the barn spun toward the sound. Rifles coming up, voices sharp with surprise. Contact east, say again, contact east. Perfect. Clayton stood up and walked straight toward the front porch like he owned it. He'd covered 10 yards before anyone noticed him. A shout from the gully. Movement, southwest approach. Clayton didn't run, didn't flinch, just kept walking. He was 15 yards from the porch when the front door opened. A young man stepped out, maybe 35. Tactical vest, pistol in his right hand, pointed at Eleanor's head. That's far enough, Ironhide. Clayton stopped. Smart, the man said. Now turn around and walk back the way you came, or the old woman dies. Clayton looked past him to Eleanor. She hadn't moved, hadn't flinched when the gun pressed against her temple. Her face was calm, almost serene. And in that moment, Clayton understood. She'd been expecting this exact scenario. You must be Viper's boy, Clayton said conversationally. The young man blinked. What Viper? Scorpion's MC. I'm guessing you're related. You've got his eyes. Same stupid confidence. Shut your mouth. I shut down the Scorpions 15 years ago because your daddy was running meth through Oakland territory and using the club as cover. Gave him a choice. Retire with dignity or get exposed. He chose retirement. Far as I know, he's living in Nevada somewhere fishing and staying out of trouble. He killed himself. The young man's voice was shaking now. Rage barely controlled. Put a gun in his mouth 2 years ago because he couldn't live with the shame of what you did to him. I'm sorry to hear that. You're sorry. The gun pressed harder against Eleanor's head. You destroyed everything he built. I destroyed a criminal enterprise that was bringing heat down on legitimate clubs. Your father made his choices. I made mine. And now I'm making mine. The young man's finger tightened on the trigger. You're going to watch this old woman die. Then you're going to die. Then all your brothers are going to die. And the Scorpions are going to rise again on your graves. Clayton looked at Eleanor, met her sightless eyes, and saw her smile. That's when he knew. She had a plan, and the plan was about to happen. Can I ask you something? Clayton said to the young man. What? Did you check the basement? Confusion flickered across the young man's face. What basement? Eleanor moved. For a 74-year-old blind woman, she moved with shocking speed. Her left hand shot up, grabbed the young man's wrist, and twisted. Not hard, not trying to overpower him, just redirecting the gun away from her head. At the same moment, her right hand found a knife that had been tucked between the cushion and the arm of the rocking chair. Sterling's old Ka-bar fighting knife. She drove it into the young man's thigh. He screamed. The gun went off, bullet punching into the porch roof. Eleanor was already moving, rolling out of the chair with a fluidity that defied her age. Clayton was running before his conscious mind caught up. He hit the porch steps at a full sprint, age and pain forgotten, and crashed into the young man like a freight train. They went down hard. The gun skittered away. Behind them, the valley erupted. Hammer's team hit the two men in the trees. Clayton heard the impact, the shouts, the sudden violence of close-quarters combat. Lucky's motorcycle roared again. The three men near the barn were turning, trying to figure out which threat to address. Ghost emerged from the darkness, like his name, a tire iron in each hand, and the two men in the gully never saw him coming. The young man beneath Clayton was trying to fight, but his leg was bleeding badly. His eyes were wide with pain and shock. "Stay down," Clayton growled. "Fuck you." The man reached for a backup piece. Clayton caught his wrist twisted, felt something snap. The screaming got louder. Then Eleanor's voice cut through it all. "Clayton, basement, now." He looked up at her. She was standing, one hand braced against the porch rail, breathing hard but steady. "What's in the basement, Ellie?" "The rest of them." "How many?" "I don't know, but I heard vehicles arrive an hour ago. They parked on the north access road. At least 2 trucks, maybe more men." "Jesus Christ," Hammer's voice on the radio. "North side secure. 2 down, not dead, but they're not getting up anytime soon." "Ghost next. South side clear, both targets neutralized." "East side secure," Lucky called. 3 bad guys looking very sorry for their life choices." That was 7, but if Eleanor was right about more men in the basement, Clayton dragged the young man to his feet. Blood was running down his leg, but he'd live. "How many more?" Clayton demanded. "Fuck you." Wrong answer. Clayton pushed him toward the porch rail. "I'm 69 years old and I'm tired. I don't have patience for games. How many men are in that basement?" The young man spat blood. "Enough to kill all of you." Eleanor stepped forward, put her hand on Clayton's arm. "Let me," she said quietly. She turned toward the young man. Her blind eyes seemed to look right through him. "You're not Viper's son," she said. "You're his nephew. I can hear it in your voice. The slight accent. You grew up in Mexico, didn't you? Came north to avenge an uncle you barely knew." The young man said nothing. "You're scared," Eleanor continued, "because this didn't go the way it was supposed to. You thought you'd ambush some old bikers. Easy targets. But now you're bleeding on my porch, and your friends are unconscious or running, and you're realizing you're in over your head. Shut up. How many men are in my basement?" Silence. Eleanor's voice went colder. "I'm a 74-year-old blind woman, and I just put a knife in your leg. Do you really want to find out what else I'm capable of?" The young man's resistance crumbled. 4. There are 4 more in the basement. They were supposed to be backup if the ambush failed. "Armed?" "Yes." "With what? Rifles, pistols, body armor?" Clayton looked at Hammer, who'd appeared on the porch with Preacher and Wrench. All 3 were breathing hard but uninjured. 4 men, full tactical gear, fortified position in the basement. Clayton shook his head. "That's a nightmare scenario." "Not necessarily," Eleanor said. Everyone looked at her. "I told you. I prepared." "What did you prepare, Ellie?" She smiled. It was not a comforting expression. "Sterling kept some things in that basement that weren't strictly legal. Things from his army days. Things he said were for emergencies." "What kind of things?" "The kind that make a lot of noise and smoke." Understanding dawned on Clayton's face. "Flashbangs. Among other items." Wrench laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "I like this woman." "So do I," Preacher agreed. "Here's the problem," Ghost said, joining them on the porch. "Even with flashbangs, we've got to get them out of a fortified position. And we're not soldiers anymore. We're old men with bad knees." "Speak for yourself," Lucky called from the yard. "My knees are fine." "You're 60. "Exactly, spring chicken." Despite everything, Clayton felt himself smile. This was brotherhood. This was what he'd been missing for 15 years. The gallows humor, the trust, the willingness to walk into hell and joke about it on the way. "Ellie," he said, "how do we get to the basement without walking into a firing line?" "There are 2 entrances," she replied. "The interior stairs from the kitchen and an exterior bulkhead door on the east side of the house. Sterling used it to bring in equipment. They'll have both covered." "Probably." But Eleanor turned her blind eyes toward him. "But they don't know I can flood the basement." Everyone stopped. "Come again," Hammer said. "This house is on a natural spring. Sterling used it for irrigation, but he also ran pipes into the basement to supply water for his workshop. There's a main valve in the crawl space under the porch. If I open it all the way, the basement fills with about 8 inches of water in under 2 minutes. That won't stop them," Ghost pointed out. No, but it will make them very uncomfortable. And when people are uncomfortable, they make mistakes. Clayton thought about it. 4 men in a basement, tactical gear and rifles, expecting an assault from above, not expecting to be flooded out. We'd need a distraction, he said slowly, something to draw their attention while someone opens that valve. I'll do it, Eleanor said immediately. Absolutely not. It's my crawl space. I know every inch of it. You'd be fumbling in the dark. Ellie, Clayton. Her voice was firm, final. Sterling spent 40 years teaching me how to survive, how to fight, how to think tactically. I'm not a helpless old woman. I'm a warrior's widow, and this is my home. I'll be damned if I let these men take it from me. Silence on the porch. Then Hammer spoke. With all due respect, ma'am, you're a badass. Eleanor smiled. Thank you. Now here's what we're going to do. 10 minutes later, everyone was in position. Lucky and Wrench were at the exterior bulkhead door ready to breach when the signal came. Hammer and Preacher were at the top of the interior stairs, flashbangs in hand, courtesy of Sterling's illegal but extremely useful stash. Ghost was with Eleanor in the crawl space under the porch providing backup while she found the valve, and Clayton was in the kitchen right above the basement with a tire iron and a prayer. The young man who'd held Eleanor hostage was zip-tied to the porch rail, leg bandaged. He wasn't going anywhere. Clayton keyed his radio. Everyone ready? A series of clicks. Ellie. Found the valve. It's stiff, but I can turn it. Ghost, you see anything we missed? Negative. Clear for now. But we need to move. Someone's going to notice 8 men missing and start asking questions. He was right. They had a window. Small and closing. On my mark, Clayton said. 3, 2, 1, mark. Ghost helped Eleanor turn the valve. Water began pouring into the basement. The effect was immediate. Shouting from below. Confusion. What the hell? Where's that water coming from? Check the pipes. Forget the pipes, someone's on the stairs. That was Hammer and Preacher making noise, drawing attention. Clayton heard footsteps below, splashing, men moving toward the interior stairs, which meant they'd turned their backs on the exterior door. Go, Clayton called into the radio. The bulkhead door exploded inward. Wrench and Lucky charged in, whooping like madmen. Hammer dropped the first flashbang down the stairs. The world turned white and loud. Clayton moved. He was down the stairs before his conscious mind caught up tire iron swinging. The basement was chaos, white light still blooming, water ankle-deep and rising. 4 men in tactical gear trying to figure out which direction the threat was coming from. Clayton hit the first one low, sweeping his legs. The man went down hard into the water. Wrench tackled another using his considerable mass to advantage. Lucky was dancing around a third man, dodging wild punches, laughing the whole time. The fourth man was reaching for his rifle. Preacher got there first. 78 years old and still faster than men half his age when it mattered. The rifle went flying, and then it was over. 4 men face down in the water, zip-tied and disarmed. 8 hostiles total, all neutralized. No one dead. No one seriously injured except for the young man with the knife wound in his leg. Clayton stood in the ankle-deep water of Eleanor Thorngate's basement, breathing hard, and started to laugh. It was the laughter of a man who'd just survived something he shouldn't have. The laughter of a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to trust his brothers and have them come through. The laughter of a man who'd just discovered that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as broken as he thought. The others joined in. 7 old men standing in a flooded basement laughing like lunatics. Above them, Eleanor Thorngate smiled in the darkness of her crawl space. Sterling would have been proud. Sheriff Langford arrived 90 minutes later with 2 deputies and a very confused expression. He was a compact man in his late 50s, former Marine, with the kind of calm competence that came from seeing the worst of humanity and somehow maintaining faith in the best. He walked into Eleanor Thorngate's house, saw 8 men zip-tied on the lawn, 7 Hells Angels drinking coffee on the porch, and an old blind woman sitting in her rocking chair like nothing unusual had happened. "Someone want to explain this?" he asked. Eleanor spoke first. "These men broke into my home with intent to murder 7 motorcyclists who were passing through on a memorial ride. I was to be used as bait. I managed to warn the intended victims. They came anyway at great personal risk and successfully defended my property without killing anyone." Langford looked at Clayton. "That about sum it up." "Pretty much. Anyone injured? One of them has a knife wound in the leg. We gave him first aid. He'll live." "Which one of you stabbed him?" "I did," Eleanor said calmly. Langford blinked. "You stabbed an armed intruder." "He had a gun to my head. I considered that sufficient provocation. Ma'am, you're blind. That doesn't mean I'm helpless, Sheriff. Langford looked at her for a long moment. Then he started to smile. No, ma'am, I can see that. He called for more backup, called for an ambulance for the injured man, took statements from everyone. The story was clean, clear. 8 men had attempted armed home invasion and assault with intent to kill. 7 men had responded to a distress call and defended an elderly woman using minimal necessary force. No charges. Self-defense was clear. But as the deputies were loading the last of the zip-tied men into vehicles, Langford pulled Clayton aside. You're Ironhide. It wasn't a question. I am. Sterling Ironclad was a friend of mine. Good man. Died too young. He did. Those men were scorpions, or trying to resurrect the club. We've been watching them for months. Drug trafficking, weapons. This was going to be their big move. Take out Hell's Angels' leadership claim, Montana Territory established themselves. You know all this, and you didn't stop them. We didn't have enough to prosecute until tonight. Langford's smile was grim. Thanks to you boys and Mrs. Thorngate, we've got 8 men on multiple felonies. Federal charges too, given the interstate nature of the conspiracy. Scorpions are done for good this time. Clayton nodded. One more thing, Langford said. The ringleader, the young one with the knife wound. He's asking to talk to you. Why? Don't know, but I figured I'd pass it along. Clayton found the young man sitting in the back of an ambulance, leg bandaged, wrists cuffed. You wanted to talk. The young man looked up. His face was pale from blood loss and pain, but his eyes were clear. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Clayton waited. My Uncle Viper. He didn't kill himself because you exposed him. He killed himself because he couldn't live with what he'd become. The drugs, the violence, the things he did to people. How do you know? He left a note. I found it after he died. He said you gave him a chance to walk away clean, to leave the life, and he was too proud to take it. That pride destroyed him, and I spent 2 years blaming you for something that was his fault. And now I'm sitting in an ambulance with a knife wound from a blind woman, and I'm realizing I'm just as stupid as he was. Clayton studied him, saw something in the young man's face that reminded him of himself at that age. Angry, lost, looking for something to belong to and making terrible choices. What's your name? Clayton asked. Marcus. Marcus, let me tell you something about revenge. It's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Your uncle made his choices. You don't have to repeat them. I'm going to prison. Probably, for a while, but you'll get out eventually, and when you do, you'll have another choice. You can come out harder and angrier, or you can come out smarter. How do I do that? You forgive yourself, your uncle, even me, if you can manage it, and you build something worth living for instead of dying for. Marcus was quiet for a long time. How did you do it? He finally asked. How did you walk away from the life? Clayton thought about Catherine, about the daughter he barely knew, about 8 years in the desert building motorcycles and running from ghosts. I didn't walk away, he said quietly. I ran, and I'm only just now figuring out that was the wrong choice. What's the right choice? I'm still learning, but I think it starts with showing up for the people who matter. Even when it's hard, even when you've been gone so long, you think they won't want you back. He stood up, looked down at the young man who tried to kill him. Good luck, Marcus. I hope you find your way. He walked back to the porch where Eleanor was waiting. The deputies left, the ambulance left. The sun was fully down now, stars brilliant in the Montana sky. 7 motorcycles still sat on the ridge above. 7 men sat on Eleanor Thorngate's porch drinking coffee and not talking about what had just happened. Because sometimes the best thing to do after violence was to just be quiet and let the world settle. Eleanor broke the silence. Clayton, can I talk to you alone? He followed her into the house. She navigated it perfectly, leading him to the kitchen. She poured 2 cups of coffee without spilling a drop, handed one to Clayton. I need to tell you something about Sterling, she said. Clayton waited. His death wasn't an accident. The words hung in the air like smoke. What the police said it was, single vehicle crash, lost control on a curve. But Sterling had ridden that road 10,000 times. He didn't lose control. What are you saying? I'm saying he knew the Scorpions were planning something. Knew they were targeting this ranch. Targeting me, and he deliberately drew them away. Clayton felt something cold spreading through his chest. How do you know? Because he told me, the night before he died. He said, Ellie, if something happens to me tomorrow, I need you to know it's not an accident. And I need you to tell Ironhide I forgive him. For the fight, for leaving, for all of it. Jesus, Ellie. He rode out alone the next morning, drew 4 scorpions into a chase, led them 20 miles from here, and when they caught up to him, he didn't go down easy. The police report said he took 3 of them off the road before he crashed. Only one walked away, and he's serving 15 years for manslaughter. Tears were streaming down Eleanor's face now. Sterling died protecting me, protecting this ranch, protecting the brothers who might come after him. And the last thing he asked me to do was forgive you, because he knew you were carrying guilt you didn't deserve. Clayton couldn't breathe. The weight of 15 years of running, of hiding, of punishing himself for walking away came crashing down. I should have been there, he whispered. No, you should have been exactly where you were, living your life, building your shop, surviving, because Sterling knew something you didn't. What? He knew you'd come back, someday, when you were ready, when the universe gave you a reason. And he made me promise that when you did, I'd help you remember who you really are. And who's that Ironhide, president, leader, brother? The man who taught Sterling what loyalty means. The man who gave Viper a chance at redemption even when he didn't have to. The man who rode into an ambush tonight to save a woman he hadn't spoken to in 15 years. Eleanor reached out, found Clayton's hand, gripped it hard. You're a good man, Clayton Maddox. Sterling believed that until his last breath. Maybe it's time you believed it too. Clayton pulled her into a hug. This woman who'd lost her sight and her husband and nearly her life but had never lost her strength. They stood like that for a long time while the coffee went cold and the stars wheeled overhead and 7 brothers waited patiently on the porch. Finally, Eleanor pulled back. Now, you boys are sleeping here tonight. I've got rooms, and tomorrow morning I'm making breakfast. And you're going to tell me about Blackjack and this memorial ride and what comes next. Yes, ma'am. They returned to the porch. The brothers looked up, saw something in Clayton's face. You good? Hammer asked quietly. Yeah, Clayton said. Yeah, I think I finally am. Morning came to Montana with the kind of light that made you believe in fresh starts. Clayton Maddox woke in a guest room that still smelled faintly of Sterling's cigars even after 12 years. The bed was soft, too soft. He was used to the hard mattress in his New Mexico workshop, where comfort took a backseat to function. But he'd slept better than he had in years. Through the window, he could see the 7 motorcycles lined up in Eleanor's yard like faithful horses waiting for their riders. Chrome caught the early sun and threw it back in 1,000 fractured rainbows. Downstairs, he heard voices. The low rumble of men who'd survived something together and were still processing it. Laughter. The clink of coffee cups. The smell of bacon. Clayton dressed slowly. His body was a roadmap of last night's violence. Bruises forming on his ribs where he'd tackled that young fool on the porch. His knuckles raw from the basement brawl. His back screaming from movements it hadn't made in 8 years. But he was smiling. When he reached the kitchen, he found Eleanor at the stove, moving with the precision of a surgeon despite her blindness. Bacon sizzled, eggs waited in a bowl, toast browned in a toaster that had probably been there since the Carter administration. The 6 brothers were scattered around the kitchen table and the adjoining living room. Hammer reading a newspaper he'd found somewhere. Preacher with his eyes closed, either praying or sleeping, hard to tell which. Ghost on his phone, checking weather and routes. Wrench tinkering with something mechanical he had found in Sterling's workshop. Lucky telling a story that had everyone smiling. This was what Clayton had missed. Not the violence, not the territory disputes, or the politics, or the constant edge of danger that came with the patch. This, the morning after, the quiet moments when brothers just existed in the same space, comfortable in the silence between words. Coffee's on the counter, Eleanor said without turning around. And good morning, Clayton. How did you know it was me? Your footsteps. Everyone walks differently. You come down heavy on your left foot. Old injury, I'm guessing. Kuwait. A bar fight in Reno, actually. 1987. Eleanor laughed. It was a good sound. Warm and genuine. Clayton poured coffee and joined the others. Hammer folded his newspaper. We were just discussing the plan. Which plan? Whether to stay another day or push on to Gardner for Blackjack's ceremony. Clayton looked around the room, saw the question in every face. Last night had changed something. They'd ridden in as 7 individuals brought together by obligation and memory. They'd fought as a unit. And now, sitting in this kitchen, with sunlight streaming through windows that had witnessed 50 years of Emma's history, they were a brotherhood again. The question wasn't really about logistics. It was about what they were riding toward. "What does Eleanor want?" Clayton asked. "I want you to stay," Eleanor said immediately. "I want to cook you a proper breakfast. I want to hear stories about Sterling that I haven't heard. I want to know about Blackjack. And I want to be part of this memorial ride if you'll have me." 7 men looked at each other. "Ma'am," Hammer said carefully, "it's a long ride to Gardner, and the roads aren't exactly—" "I've been on the back of a motorcycle since before you were born, young man." Eleanor's voice was steel-wrapped in velvet. "Sterling and I rode together for 43 years. I may be blind, but I can still hold on." "It's not about capability," Ghost said gently. "It's about safety. If something happened, then something happens. I'm 74 years old. I've buried a husband, lost my sight, and last night I stabbed a man who was threatening my home. I think I can handle a motorcycle ride." Silence. Then Lucky started laughing. "I like her. She can ride with me." "The hell she will," Clayton said. "She rides with me." Eleanor smiled. "Then it's settled. Now sit down and eat, all of you. You fought for my home. The least I can do is feed you." They ate. And in the eating, in the passing of plates, in the refilling of coffee cups, in the easy conversation that came with full stomachs, in the adrenaline crash after violence, something healed. Clayton watched Preacher tell a story about the time Sterling had won a poker game with nothing but sheer audacity and a terrible bluff. Watched Wrench demonstrate how Sterling had taught him to adjust carburetors by sound alone. Watched Lucky describe a ride through a thunderstorm where Sterling had led them through when everyone else wanted to pull over. Stories, the currency of brotherhood. And Eleanor listened to everyone, her blind eyes glistening with tears and joy in equal measure. "He never told me that story," she'd say, or "That sounds exactly like something Sterling would do," or simply, "Thank you. Thank you for remembering him." Clayton realized something in that moment. This was the memorial, not the ceremony they'd ride to in Gardner, not the scattering of ashes or the formal words. This kitchen, these stories, this sharing of a man's life between the people who'd loved him. This was how you honored the dead. You kept them alive in the telling. They left Eleanor's ranch at noon, 8 riders now, instead of 7. Eleanor sat behind Clayton on the shovelhead, hands secure on his waist head, tilted slightly, as if she was listening to the engine's song. She'd insisted on bringing Sterling's old coot, the leather vest with the Hells Angels Montana charter patch. It was too big for her, hung like a blanket over her shoulders, but she wore it with pride. "Sterling would want to make this ride," she'd said, "so I'm bringing him with me." No one argued. They rode north through Montana wilderness that seemed to go on forever. Mountains rose like cathedrals. Rivers cut through stone that had been old when dinosaurs walked. The sky was so blue it hurt to look at directly. And the 7 motorcycles, 8 counting the ghost of Sterling, riding in the coot Eleanor wore, made music that echoed off canyon walls and sent hawks spiraling into thermals. This was what it meant to ride. Not rebellion, not outlaw culture, not the image that movies sold and civilians feared. This, freedom measured in miles. Brotherhood measured in the trust of the man beside you. Memory given form in chrome and gasoline. Clayton felt Eleanor's grip tighten as they leaned into a curve. Felt her relax as they straightened out. She was reading the road through him, through the bike, trusting completely. When was the last time anyone had trusted him like that Catherine had? Before the cancer took her, before the years of club runs and late nights and the slow erosion of a marriage under the weight of competing loyalties. His daughter Diane had trusted him once too, when she was young and still thought her father hung the moon. Before she grew old enough to see the flaws. The absences, the choices that put brotherhood before blood. But here was Eleanor, blind and brave, holding on to him as they carved through mountain passes at 60 miles an hour. Trusting him with her life because Sterling had trusted him with his. That meant something. Maybe it meant everything. They stopped for lunch at a roadside diner that looked like it had been there since the 50s and would probably be there until the mountains eroded to dust. The waitress was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She took one look at 8 people in leather vests and motorcycle boots and smiled. "You boys want the back corner booth?" "Yes, ma'am," Hammer said. "And the lady?" "With us," Clayton said, Eleanor's hand on his arm. They squeezed into 2 booths pushed together, ordered burgers and fries and pie because that's what you ordered in places like this. The waitress brought Eleanor's plate and described everything on it, position and contents. Burger at 6 o'clock, fries at 3, pickle at 12. Eleanor smiled. "Thank you, that's very kind. My brother came back from blind. the waitress said quietly. Learned real quick that kindness costs nothing and means everything. After she left, Preacher said a short blessing. Nothing formal, just a few words thanking the universe for another day, another mile, another meal shared with brothers. And for Sterling, he added, who taught us that the road is where we find ourselves. And for Blackjack, Hammer added, who's waiting for us at the finish line. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Ghost spoke up. Can I ask something? Shoot, Clayton said. Last night, when you walked up to that house, knowing there were 8 armed men waiting, what were you thinking? Clayton chewed his burger, considering the question. I was thinking about Sterling, he finally said. About the time in 1983 when we were riding through Nevada and came across a car accident. Bad one. Family of 4. The father was trapped, car was leaking bad, and everyone else was too scared to get close. What did Sterling do? Lucky asked. He didn't hesitate, just handed me his keys and said, if this goes bad, get the bike to Ellie. Then he walked right up to that car, pulled the father out, and carried him to safety 30 seconds before the whole thing went up in flames. Did the man survive? He did, came to the clubhouse a month later to thank Sterling, brought his whole family. The kids made Sterling a card, called him a hero. Eleanor was crying silently. I never knew about that. Sterling never told you because that's who he was. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because it was the right thing to do, because someone needed help and he was there. Clayton set down his burger. So last night when I heard Eleanor's warning and knew she was in danger, I thought about that, about Sterling walking toward that burning car. And I realized I'd spent 15 years being afraid of making the wrong choice, of failing, of not being good enough. But Sterling never worried about any of that. He just did what needed doing. So you walked up to the house, Wrench said. So I walked up to the house. Silence settled over the table. Then Hammer raised his coffee cup. To Sterling, who taught us that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right despite the fear. They clinked cups, coffee and memories and respect for a brother who'd been gone 12 years, but whose influence still shaped the living. The waitress brought pie, apple still warm with ice cream melting into the crust. Eleanor ate hers, slowly savoring each bite. This is good, she said. Sterling and I used to stop at places like this. He'd order pie and spend an hour telling me what he saw out the window. The mountains, the clouds, the way light moved across the valley. He was my eyes for so long. What happened? Lucky asked gently. How did you lose your sight? Diabetes, complications. The doctor said it was coming for years, but I ignored the signs. Thought I had more time. Then one morning I woke up and the shadows were darker. By evening they were gone completely. That must have been terrifying. It was for about a week. Then I got angry, and then I got determined. I learned Braille, learned to navigate by sound and touch, learned to cook and clean and run a ranch without eyes. Sterling helped, but he also pushed me to be independent. Said, Ellie, I won't always be here. You need to know you can survive without me. Her voice cracked slightly. He was right. He wasn't always there, but he gave me the tools to survive anyway. Clayton reached over and squeezed her hand. You've done more than survive, Ellie. You've thrived. Some days, other days I just miss him so much I can barely breathe. I know that feeling, Preacher said quietly. They all did. Every man at that table had lost someone. Wives, brothers, parents, friends. The price of living long enough to collect memories was that you also collected ghosts. But sitting together sharing pie and stories, the ghosts seemed less heavy. Maybe that was the secret. You didn't outrun grief. You didn't overcome it. You just learned to carry it in the company of people who understood. They reached Gardner as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks. The town was small, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers were noted but not necessarily unwelcome. A main street with a few shops, a gas station, a bar that looked like it had been there since the gold rush days, and a cemetery on a hill overlooking the Yellowstone River. That's where they were headed. Hammer had made arrangements with the local funeral home. Blackjack's ashes were waiting. The plot was purchased. Everything was ready. They parked the bikes at the base of the hill and walked up. The cemetery was old, headstones dating back to the 1800s, miners and ranchers and the occasional outlaw all resting under Montana soil. Blackjack's plot was near an old cottonwood tree. The funeral director had placed a simple marker. Nothing fancy, just his name, his dates, and the words, he wrote his own road. The 7 brothers, 8 counting Eleanor, formed a circle around the plot. Hammer held the urn containing Blackjack's ashes. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Hammer broke the silence. Blackjack was a difficult man, stubborn, proud, quick to anger, and slow to forgive. He made mistakes, hurt people he loved, let pride drive wedges between him and his brothers. He looked at Clayton, but he was also loyal, brave, a man who kept his word even when it cost him. And at the end, he found the courage to forgive, to let go of old anger and ask for peace. Hammer opened the urn. Brother, we brought you home, to the mountains you loved, to the land that made you who you were. We're sorry it took so long, and we're sorry we couldn't make peace while you were alive to hear it. He poured a portion of the ashes into the hole that had been prepared. Then he passed the urn to Ghost. Ghost added his portion. You taught me that leadership isn't about being right. It's about making the hard calls and living with the consequences. Rest easy, brother. To Wrench. You trusted me with your bike when no one else would. That meant more than you knew. To Lucky. You called me kid until the day I turned 50. I miss that. I miss you. To Preacher. You showed me that faith and motorcycles aren't incompatible, that a man can believe in God and still live free. Thank you. The urn came to Clayton. He stared down at the ashes of his best friend, the man he'd fought with, walked away from, regretted losing every single day for 15 years. Blackjack. His voice was rough. I'm sorry for the pride, for the stubbornness, for letting our differences matter more than our brotherhood. You deserve better from me, and I'm going to spend whatever time I have left making sure your memory gets the honor it deserves. He poured the ashes, watched them settle into Montana earth. Then he passed the urn to Eleanor. She held it carefully, tilted her head as if listening to something only she could hear. I didn't know you, Blackjack, she said quietly, but I know Sterling loved you, and I know these men loved you, and I know that love doesn't die just because the body does. So wherever you are now, I hope you found peace. I hope you and Sterling are riding together on roads we can't see yet, and I hope when we get there, you'll be waiting. She added her portion to the grave. The urn was empty. Preacher spoke a benediction. Old words, sacred words, words about dust and eternity and the journey that never truly ends. They filled in the grave, by hand, taking turns with the shovel. The physical labor of laying a brother to rest. When it was done, they stood in silence as the sun touched the mountain peaks and turned everything to gold. Then from the parking lot below, a sound rose. 7 motorcycles starting in sequence. Remote starters activated simultaneously. The engines roared, a thunderous symphony that echoed across the valley, a 21-gun salute done with horsepower instead of rifles. The sound rolled on for a full minute. Then one by one the engines shut down. Silence returned. Clayton looked at Hammer. Who set that up? Hammer smiled. Lucky. He's sneaky when he wants to be. Blackjack would have loved it. I know. They walked back down the hill as twilight gathered, back to the bikes, back to the living world. But something had shifted. Some weight had been lifted. Blackjack was home. The ride was complete. And for the first time in 15 years, Clayton Maddox felt like maybe he could find his way home too. That night, they gathered at the bar on Gardner's Main Street. It was the kind of place where bikers were welcome as long as they behaved. Dark wood, neon beer signs, a jukebox playing country music from when country music was still country. They claimed a corner booth, ordered beers and whiskey, toasted Blackjack, toasted Sterling, toasted every brother who'd ever ridden and wouldn't ride again. Eleanor sat with them nursing a glass of wine, listening to the stories flow like water. Somewhere around the third round, a younger man approached the table. Maybe 40, leather vest with a different club's patches. Respectful distance maintained. Excuse me, he said. Are you Ironhide? Clayton looked up. I am. My father rode with you. Oakland chapter back in the 90s. Tommy Riggs. Road name was Diesel. Clayton's memory turned. Tommy Diesel. Damn, how is he? The young man's face fell. He passed 3 years ago, cancer. I'm sorry to hear that. He talked about you until the end. Said you were the best president the chapter ever had. Said you taught him what it meant to be a brother. Clayton didn't know what to say to that. Anyway, the young man continued, I just wanted to say thank you for what you meant to him, for what you taught him. He gave me a good life because of the values you instilled. He stuck out his hand. Clayton shook it. Your father was a good man. I'm glad he's remembered. The young man nodded and walked away. Hammer watched him go. You touched a lot of lives, Ironhide. So did all of us. Maybe, but you led. That's different. People followed you because they believed in you. And then I left. And now you're back. Clayton looked around the table at these men who'd ridden with him into danger without hesitation, who'd trusted him when he didn't trust himself. What if I told you I don't want to come back, he said quietly. Not full-time, not as president or even as a full patch member. Silence. What do you want? Hammer asked. Clayton thought about his shop in New Mexico, about the peace he'd found in building motorcycles with his hands instead of managing men with his words. He thought about Eleanor, brave and fierce, and teaching him that strength came in forms he'd never considered. He thought about Catherine's last words, about becoming the man he was meant to be instead of the man he thought he had to be. I want to be a nomad, he said. The word hung in the air. Nomad, a member of the club but not tied to any specific chapter. Free to ride where needed when needed. Part of the Brotherhood but maintaining independence. It was rare, reserved for men who'd earned respect beyond measure. Men who could be trusted to represent the club without constant oversight. Men like Ironhide. Hammer smiled slowly. I think that's perfect. Yeah, we need someone who can bridge chapters, who can mediate disputes, who can ride in when shit gets complicated and help sort it out. Someone with your experience and your judgment. But we also need you to be happy, brother. And I don't think you'd be happy locked into the structure again. Ghost nodded. Nomad Ironhide. I like it. Gives us a reason to see you more than once every 15 years, Lucky added. Preacher raised his glass. To new beginnings, and old brothers finding new roads. They drank. Clayton felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying so long, he'd forgotten it was there. This was the answer. Not running away, not forcing himself back into a role that didn't fit anymore, but finding a third path, a way to honor the Brotherhood while still honoring himself. Eleanor's hand found his under the table. Squeezed. Sterling would be proud, she whispered. They stayed in Gardner for 2 more days, visited the plot each morning, told more stories, met with local MC members who'd known Blackjack in his youth, and slowly the grief transformed into something else. Not forgetting, never forgetting, but remembering with joy instead of pain, celebrating the life instead of mourning the loss. On the 3rd morning, as they prepared to ride out, a truck pulled up to Eleanor's motel. A man stepped out, late 40s, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place in rural Montana, carrying himself with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. Eleanor heard the footsteps and turned. Warren, Sean. Hi, Mom. Warren Thorngate, Eleanor's son, the architect from Boston who visited twice a year and thought MC culture was beneath his successful civilized life. He crossed to his mother, embraced her stiffly. I got your message about the attack. I came as fast as I could. Are you all right? I'm fine, Warren. Better than fine. Warren looked at the 7 bikers standing beside 7 motorcycles. His expression was carefully neutral. These are the men who defended my home, Eleanor said, and my life. Warren's expression shifted. Not quite gratitude, not quite acceptance, something wary and conflicted. I owe you thanks, he said to the group at large. No thanks necessary, Hammer replied. Your mother's a hero. We were just backup. My mother is 74 years old and blind. Your mother, Clayton said quietly, is one of the bravest people I've ever met. She outsmarted 8 armed men, coordinated a tactical defense, and personally stabbed one of them when he threatened her home. With all due respect, Mr. Thorngate, you might want to reconsider your assumptions about what your mother is capable of. Warren stared at him. Who are you? Clayton Maddox. I rode with your father for 30 years. Something flickered in Warren's eyes. Ironhide. That's right. My father talked about you, said you were the best rider he'd ever known. Also said you were stubborn as hell and twice as dangerous when cornered. He wasn't wrong. Warren looked at his mother, really looked at her, saw her standing straight and proud despite everything she'd been through, saw the peace in her face. Mom, I think we need to talk. I think we do too. But first, say goodbye to these men properly. They're family. Warren's jaw tightened, but he extended his hand to Hammer, to Ghost, to each of them in turn. When he reached Clayton, he held the handshake longer. Thank you, he said quietly, for protecting her, and for whatever you did to make her smile like that. I haven't seen her this happy since Dad died. Your father was a great man. Your mother is a great woman. All I did was remind her of her own strength. Warren nodded, stepped back. Eleanor moved to each biker, hugging them, thanking them, making them promise to visit. When she reached Clayton, she held on longest. Don't be a stranger, she said. You have a home here whenever you need it. I know. Thank you, Ellie. And Clayton. Yeah. Call your daughter. Whatever happened between you, it's not worth losing her forever. Sterling and I had Warren, but we should have had more time with him. Don't make that mistake. Clayton swallowed hard. I'll call her. Promise, I promise. Eleanor smiled, kissed his cheek, stepped back. The 7 bikers mounted up. Engines roared to life. That beautiful symphony of controlled chaos. Warren watched his mother's face as the motorcycles pulled away. Saw the joy there, the peace. You really do love this, don't you? He asked. I really do, Eleanor replied. It's who your father was. It's part of who I am. And maybe if you let it, it could be part of who you are too. Warren didn't answer. But he put his arm around his mother and they stood together, watching 7 riders disappear down the Montana highway. Behind them, Sterling's coupe hung on Eleanor's shoulders, and somewhere in the mountains, ghosts were smiling. The ride back to Oakland took 3 days. They moved slower now, less urgency, more appreciation for the journey. They stopped at overlooks to watch sunsets, stayed at small-town motels and ate at local diners, talked about everything and nothing. And somewhere in Utah, Clayton's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Hello, Dad. His heart stopped. Diane, his daughter, 44 years old now, a woman he'd last spoken to when she was 29 and angry, and telling him she was done trying to have a relationship with a father who was never there. Diane, his voice cracked. Hi. Warren Thorngate called me, Eleanor's son. He got my number from some MC database or something. He told me what happened in Montana. Oh, he said you walked into an ambush to save an old blind woman you hadn't seen in 15 years. Yeah, silence on the line. Why, hoy? Diane finally asked. Because she needed help, and because I owed her late husband a debt I could never repay. That's it. That's the reason you risked your life. That's it? More silence. Dad, I don't understand you. I've spent 15 years trying to understand you, and I can't. Clayton pulled over, stopped the bike, held the phone with both hands like it was the most precious thing in the world. I know. I don't understand me either, but I'm trying to, and part of that is calling you, which I should have done years ago. Why didn't you? Because I was ashamed. Because I knew I'd failed you as a father, and I didn't know how to fix it. Because running away was easier than facing what I'd done. He heard her crying softly on the other end. I'm sorry, Diane, for all of it. For choosing the club over you and your mother. For not being there when you needed me. For letting pride and fear keep me away after your mom died. I'm sorry. I'm angry at you, she said through tears. I know. I've been angry for 15 years. I know. But I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of having a father I never see. I'm tired of my kids asking about Grandpa and me not knowing what to tell them. Clayton's breath caught. Kids. 2 of them. Sarah is 12. Michael is 9. They're good kids, Dad. You'd like them. He had grandchildren. 2 of them. And he'd never met them. Would you let me meet them? Diane was quiet for a long time. I don't know. I need to think about it. But maybe, if you mean it this time, if you're really trying to change, I am. I swear I am. Then call me next week. We'll talk more. Just talk. No promises, no pressure. Just talk. I can do that. Okay. Goodbye, Dad. Goodbye, Diane. And thank you for giving me another chance. She hung up. Clayton sat on the side of the road holding his phone, crying like he hadn't cried since Catherine died. The other 6 had stopped ahead. They were waiting, patient, respectful. Finally, Clayton wiped his eyes, started his bike, and caught up. Hammer looked at him, saw the tears, saw the hope. Good news, yeah, the best. Then let's ride, brother. And they did. They reached Oakland 6 months after they'd left. The clubhouse was exactly as Clayton remembered. Old brick building, Hell's Angels sign, bikes lined up out front like soldiers at attention. Home. But Clayton knew he wouldn't be staying. He'd ride out tomorrow, back to New Mexico, back to his shop. But he'd return, regularly, as a nomad and as a bridge between chapters, as a brother who finally understood that you didn't have to choose between freedom and family. You could have both. That night, they held a meeting, official business, Hammer as president, Ghost as VP, the roles filled and functioning. And then at the end, Hammer stood. Brothers, we have a motion. Clayton Maddox Ironhide has requested nomad status. He served this club for 38 years as a member and 15 years as president. He's earned the right to ride his own road. All in favor, every hand went up. Motion carries. Ironhide, you're officially a nomad. Welcome home, brother. They presented him with a new patch, still the Death's Head, still the Hells Angels rocker, but now underneath a new bottom rocker, Nomad. Clayton held it like treasure. This was who he was supposed to be. Not president, not exile. Nomad. Free but connected. Independent but loyal. Himself. 6 months later, Clayton sat in his New Mexico shop working on a custom build for a client. His phone rang. Diane. They talk 3 times a week now, rebuilding slowly, carefully. Hey, Dad. Hey, sweetheart. So, the kids have been asking, and I've been thinking, and would you like to come for Thanksgiving? Clayton set down his wrench. Are you serious? I'm serious, it's time. They should know their grandfather. And I should stop punishing you for the past. I'd love to. I'd love that more than anything. Okay, I'll send you the details. Fair warning, Michael is obsessed with motorcycles. He's going to ask you a million questions. Clayton laughed. I think I can handle that. After they hung up, he sat in his workshop and looked at the framed photo on his workbench. Catherine, smiling, beautiful, gone but not forgotten. I'm trying, babe, he whispered. I'm finally trying. Outside, his shovel head sat ready, the Nomad patch sewn onto his coot. Tomorrow he'd ride to Montana, check on Eleanor, help her with some ranch repairs. Next month, Oakland, mediate a dispute between chapters. And at Thanksgiving, Oregon, to meet his grandchildren for the first time. The road stretched out in every direction. And for the first time in his life, Clayton Maddox knew exactly where he was going. Eleanor Thorngate's ranch had become something more than a home. It was a gathering place now, a sanctuary. Once a month, bikers from various chapters would arrive, older men mostly, veterans of the life, some with patches, some who'd retired them long ago. They'd work on the ranch, fix fences, repair buildings, maintain the land that Sterling had loved. And in the evenings, they'd gather on the porch and they'd tell stories. Stories of rides long past, brothers gone but remembered. Roads traveled and lessons learned. Warren came regularly now, brought his family. His kids learned to ride horses, to fix things with their hands, to understand that their grandfather had been part of something bigger than himself. Clayton was there most months, sometimes alone, sometimes with Diane and the grandkids. Sarah and Michael had taken to motorcycles like ducks to water, Michael especially. The kid had a gift for mechanics that reminded Clayton of himself at that age. One evening as the sun set over the Montana mountains, Clayton sat with Eleanor on her porch. Sterling would be proud, she said, of all this, of what you've built, of who you've become. I had good teachers. You were always this person, Clayton. You just needed to remember. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sound of children laughing in the yard, motorcycles being tinkered with, in the barn brothers, sharing stories around a fire pit. Ellie, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever regret it, the life with Sterling, the club? All of it, Eleanor smiled. Not for a second. It wasn't always easy. There were hard times, scary times, times when I didn't know if he'd come home. But it was real. It was honest. It was a life lived fully with no apologies. She reached over and found his hand. That's all any of us can hope for, Clayton. A life lived fully. With people we love. On roads we choose. That's enough. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, it is. The stars came out, one by one. A million points of light in the endless dark. And somewhere on a highway between here and everywhere, brothers were riding. Some young, just starting their journey. Some old, nearing the finish line. All of them connected by something stronger than blood, deeper than law, more enduring than time. Brotherhood. The road went on forever, and they would ride it together. For Sterling and Blackjack. For all the brothers who've crossed the finish line. For Eleanor and the warriors' widows who keep the memories alive. And for every person who's ever been lost and found their way home. The ride never truly ends. It just changes direction. Keep the shiny side up. Keep the rubber side down. And remember, you're never alone on the road when you ride with brothers.